Now what I'm going to do here is adapt this scene of the Langdale Pikes, which is a well-known beauty spot in the Lake District in the northwest of England. Now you can see this view is taken around about autumn or in the fall, depending which part of the world you're from. But what we're going to do is adapt it. We're going to change the sky to something that's altogether misty and more threatening. We're going to dull it down slightly, do some wet in wet, and completely change the picture. I'm going to use ultramarine blue, light red, burnt umber and raw sienna, but I'm also going to bring in just a touch of the lemon yellow towards the end when I want some particularly dark greens, if I'm just going to add a few darker areas for trees in the foreground. Right, I'm putting some water in the sky, but remember, even on a miserable, dull, overcast, wet day, you're still going to have a lighter area around the horizon. I've put the merest touch of raw sienna into it. Now what I'm going to do is to mix some of the ultramarine blue with, I'll do it over here, with some of the burnt umber, and that's going to give us a nice bluey grey colour. We'll drag it down, there we are. That's, you can see the way it's spreading and all like veins appearing as the water and the pigment runs through the humps and hollows of the paper. I might even do that a little bit stronger. I'm going to put some ultramarine blue in now, quite strong, just to give it that's better, a little bit of a stronger cast. I think I'll have a little mix of the light red and the ultramarine blue, quite strong. Again, it's got to take account of the water that's already in the sky, but we'll drag a few bits and pieces here like that, and you can see there's the odd place that I haven't actually painted with water, just here and there, where we're going to end up with odd little flecks of light in the sky, and that's fine as well, because you often get that in this country with the weather. You get an overcast day, but you get those little bright little flecks, and it's always a cause for optimism that you think, well, maybe the sun's going to break through. Very rarely does mine, but there's no harm in hoping. I've added a little bit of raw sienna. You can see it's actually, there's more on the paper towel than anything. What you're trying to create is this effect here where you're dragging the paint down as if you can imagine that the rain is just falling out of the sky. Now what I'm going to do is actually drag that grey, pale grey paint over this area of the mountain. You see the way I'm just dragging the side of the brush like that, and I'm basically just softening it out to next to nothing. Okay, that's nice and dry to the touch now, and you can even see with this little fleck of light that I've left, almost by accident, and it is a happy accident, it looks like there's a ray of, if not sunlight, certainly lighter light trying to force its way through the break in the clouds and onto the mountain. We're going to paint the mountains now in a browny grey colour, similar to the browny grey that we put on to the sky. Again, that helps to unify everything. But what we're going to do when we get to this part here, and I'll do this part first, is to put some clean water on this area. So as we paint the mountain in fairly strong colours, when it hits this clean water, it'll automatically dilute back to nothing and create the cloudy, misty effect that we want. And you can see there already, as the paint starts to hit the clean water, it's starting to fade out quite quickly like that. Now you can see how that's such a lovely effect. It's not running away, the paint's thick enough to, if you like, stand its ground against the water, but it does bleed off quite nicely to that sort of hit and miss effect, and gives that lovely effect that we're trying to achieve. Right, now where we had water here, which was already on the paper when we dragged the thick paint into it, in this area here, if you remember, we've dragged the clouds down over the mountain. So what we're going to do is to just do a hint of the edge of the mountain here disappearing in the mist. And the way I'm going to achieve that is by putting the paint on and then just softening it out with clean water and dragging the paint into this dry area here. This is dry, quite dry now, so that you get the same sort of effect, but if you like, without having the water already there. You're thinning out the paint rather than running it into clean water. Okay, now again I've got the water and I'm taking the excess water, and now what I'm actually doing, I suppose, is just, you can see like that. I don't want to create back runs if I can help it. You've got to be careful here, because if you have fresh clean water touching watery paint, then you're going to get a back run as this water here floods into the paint and pushes the pigment, and that's how you end up with those tide marks. We'll get the cloud, the mountain rather, coming out of the other side now. It's a little bit more blue maybe. Again, you can see, I don't know whether you can see on this, the way because we're effectively mixing the blue and the light red on the paper, it's granulating in a quite a lovely way. I'm going to try and keep that as a lighter edge. There we are, like that. So you've got light against dark. You must remember to keep, don't forget while you're busy doing your mist on the mountains, you've got all the other techniques that you've got to remember to make sure they work. Now I'm going to put a big band of mist here. I can always take the water out later on if I want. Right, now I've painted in here a couple of very, very light areas. Very, very weak paint, but generally following the line of the mountain, and then all I've done is just very quickly, after a second or two, blotted them out. It's left a residue, but it just gives that added hint of the mountain just breaking through the clouds and the mist that's dropping over. Blot out with a damp paper towel, and that'll just lift out some of that water and a little bit of the pigment, and it'll give me a nice soft edge. If you put a dry paper towel on this and take it off, it's going to take more paint off, and it's not going to be quite as subtle. I'll just finish off these areas here with a bit of green and brown to represent the same sort of autumn scene. That hint of raw sienna in the foreground now, and we're just going to paint in a few trees, create a few rocks out of that. A bit of brown in now, and a little bit of light red. Typical Lake District sort of heather that's around this part of the world at this time of the year. You can see I'm just putting some darker colours in the foreground here, and I'm just touching underneath these little flecks of white, and you can see it very effectively and very, very simply gives us a nice impression of rocks and stones and what have you. Again, what I'm trying to remember to do is to have light against dark or dark against light. And I think what I'm going to do is have this slightly darker here. So I'm going to put some burnt umber and ultramarine blue. And the beautiful part about it again is you can see that the paint is mixing or being mixed on the paper. We're going to splay now the hairs on the brush, and we're just going to create a sort of a hit and miss effect with some foliage like that. But because these are hard edged trees now with the stronger paint, it does give that added emphasis to the misty effect in the distance. Right, I think we've achieved the objective. We found three ways of doing mist on the mountain. One is dragging the still wet paint into nothingness over the line of the mountain and then going back in a little later on with some just lighter areas. We've also put some strong paint in, and when we've got to the area where we wanted the mist to be, is to thin that off very rapidly with clean water and dragged it, teased it almost into the mist. Here we've used a paper towel, a dampened paper towel, and then the third technique was where we painted the mountain in a very strong colour, but prior to that we'd put a good strong band of water, clean water here, and we just painted up into that, and as soon as we saw the paint starting to run away, we've stopped painting. So there we are. I hope you've enjoyed this one. There's the Langdale Pikes on a typical misty, murky Lake District day, with the mist surrounding the peaks, and maybe just a hint of brighter things to come during the day.